Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot.
Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're here in the John Hope Franklin Center. We're joined today by Keith Knight, who describes himself as the gentleman cartoonist. He's here to talk about the work that he does in terms of visual arts and commentary. How are you doing today, Keith?
I'm all right. Happy to be here,
Keith's most recent book is They Shoot Black People, Don't They? Which was published in 2016. He also does 3 columns, The Nightlife, Think, and The K Chronicles.
Yeah. 3 different comic strips that have 3 different venues. The K Chronicles is my autobiographical, sort of long, multi-panel strip. Think is my single panel, sort of out of the news commentary. And then The Nightlife is my daily strip that runs in daily newspapers like the Washington Post.
Let's go back to the beginning. What inspired you to become a cartoonist?
I think I've always drawn. I think everybody draws.
Yeah. Not everybody doesn't draw well, right?
Yeah, but early on, like everyone just draws, and then adults start determining who draws well and who doesn't draw well.
Gotcha.
And I just kept on being encouraged, which was great.
Yeah.
But detrimental to anybody who was like, well, what about mine? But I just kept on doing it and working it into my schoolwork, and I did it. I got better grades with everything except math. Like math did not fly. I just saw something recently where someone posted their schoolwork where they just gave up on some sort of geometry problem and then just started drawing. That's what I used to do. It was a nightmare. And I never had to use it ever. I just want to say that. Never had to use it.
What were you reading as a kid? As I was thinking about our conversation today, I thought about the fact that when I was a kid, I read Dagwood, I read Motley's Crew, and as a kid growing up in the South Bronx, Motley's Crew was really my introduction to white working class people, because I didn't know any white working class people. But what were you reading when you were a kid?
Well, I remember Mutt and Jeff in the Boston Globe. Like that was like, I knew that was sort of like an old school sort of, something like a working class thing. But, the stuff that really resonated with me was Peanuts. It was interesting, Peanuts and Doonesbury. Yeah. For some reason, like Doonesbury, because it was the first time I'd seen black people in a comic strip, and it wasn't just, and they were talking about black issues. Yeah. Like I remember seeing this Doonesbury book at the local library. It was great. It was his early Yale strips, Gary Trudeau's early Yale strips, and it was a black character knocking on Doonesbury's door, and he's like, "Hey, would you like to give to the campus Black Panther party?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm pretty tapped." And the other guy's like, "No, I don't have any money." He's like, "Okay," and then he writes an X on his door, and then walks up. And the white dudes are like, "I don't like the looks of this." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's great!" And so I just, it makes sense that suddenly, that I do stuff that is out of the news and political, but also with real characters like myself and my friends and my wife and family and all that stuff sort of mixed in, because it's very influenced by Doonesbury. Yeah,
the Doonesbury reference makes sense. I mean, when I think about your work, I think Doonesbury, I think Bloom County.
Yeah. Bloom County.
But also I think, in a more historical context, I think about somebody like the black cartoonist Ollie Harrington, who's doing this incredible biting commentary in the 50s and the 60s from Paris. And obviously, I imagine most folks immediately think about Aaron Magruder and the Boondocks in terms of your work.
Yeah, I knew, when I was first breaking, I remember sneaking into the National Cartoonist Society's convention in San Francisco when I lived in San Francisco. And the first dude that walked up to me says, "Hey, are you Aaron Magruder?" And I did a whole strip about that, and I knew I'd made it when a young brother came up to me and said, "Hey, you know, whenever I go someplace, someone asks me if I'm you," and I was like, "All right, it's moved," but yeah, just Ollie Harrington totally resonates because he spent a lot of time in Germany, and I'm married to a German. And my destiny, when I saw that he went and lived in Germany, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm gonna follow in the footsteps of Ollie Harrington. And on one of my slideshows a couple of years ago at the VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, somebody who was there gave me a book on Ollie Harrington that he wrote. And it was a series of essays on why he left America. And I was just like, oh my God, this is.
Do you think, because you know there are folks who will see the work that you do and think, well, you know, this is really analog, right? And what's a digital era? You know, you could even in talking about Magruder, right, the shift from the strip to the television show. Though I found the strip myself much more engaging than the series was for different reasons.
Different, and they're different mediums,
right?
And so it's a whole different. Even between the different strips that I do, it's a completely different rhythm, different technique, and different way you go about it. But I totally get sort of visiting characters every day and checking in on them. You know, that's the great thing about a daily strip. But I think his transition to television, I thought he did really well. You know, the characters are much different, different style, and so I mean, I applaud him in many ways, sort of following in his footsteps.
Well, let's talk about the change of platform for you. You know, what does it mean to go from, you know, you mentioned Doonesbury before, you know, where folks are reading strips in newspapers, right? Sitting down for breakfast or lunchtime or after a long day of work and opening up a newspaper and going to the comics. Folks don't do that anymore, right? I mean, you have to go find stuff online or have stuff sent to your feed. How has that change been, you know, in terms of thinking about the digital medium versus, you know, print?
I have more readers than I've ever had, being on the internet. And a lot of times, a lot of people have said, like, oh, it's a blessing and a curse, because for a long time they didn't figure out how to monetize the exposure on the internet. But I think they have now. And with the advent of Patreon, which is our Patreon website, and a lot of these bigger publications online getting funded by places. And actually a lot of my peers becoming editors cartoon editors at a lot of these venues. I've had more gigs this past year and a half than I ever had. And I'm in fewer papers. In fact, papers have been inquiring recently about my stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, like I haven't dealt with a paper in so long that I actually wrote to my peers going, what do we charge nowadays for papers running my stuff? Which is really nice, which is really refreshing. But yeah, just every 6 months, there's something new that comes up that gives you another way to monetize somehow, some way. And what's interesting to me is when I first went to an editorial cartoonist convention, I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to meet all these peers and that are older than me that I'm going to be able to learn all this stuff. They all came to me and they were like, how do you make a living? They were like my paper just cut my gig, cut my job. So now I have to freelance. And because I always freelanced, you know, always hustled, and really, I really took it from basically hip hop, which is like, selling out,
DIY.
just selling
do it
out the back of your
yourself.
truck. And just, I used to go with a sandwich board at events that I thought would have my people there. Sandwich board, books, just selling like crazy. I remember I was just at the Harlem, at the Schomburg in Harlem.
With John Jennings and them folks.
Yeah. And I remember going to New York with my cousin and having a sandwich board and just being in the subway selling books. And people that we were crazy. It was great though. It was really, really a fun time.
You're watching Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined by cartoonist Keith Knight, talking about his work. Your work in the recent years have turned to really focusing on the issue of police brutality. Your most recent book, They Kill Black People, Don't They? A riff off of the film They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
Yeah, they shoot black people, don't they? Right. Yeah. That I always like to play on those type of words and stuff, and those type of titles. And really, that came about when I was doing a comic about Ferguson, and I was sitting there going, man, I've been doing this for 20 years. And every time I do a strip, I'm like, oh man, I hope this is the last strip I have to do on this subject. But of course, that is never the case. Yeah. And I just remember seeing this photo of this young lady just holding up the sign with this look on her face, like, I can't believe I still have to protest this shit.
Right.
And just the look, I was like, oh my God, that's it. And I just thought, why don't I compile all these comics together and sort of just have a discussion about why this continues to be, and sort of the historical context of it, and what we can do to move forward and help stop it. And it was eye-opening, because the first offers I got to do the slideshow were from Germany. Bouncing back to Ollie Arrington, Germany gave me love, so I did a tour of German universities talking about it. And then I put out a press release saying, why am I going to Germany to discuss this when I should be doing it in the States? So then when that went out, I started getting gigs here, and it wasn't until I moved to the South where I started to really learn so much about the Black experience here in the States, and how I was able to incorporate that into the current slideshow and put everything in context. And in many ways, as horrible as it is to learn truly how this country was built, it was also a relief to know that, ghettos were formed as in a particular plan. It wasn't just, and the fact that a white family's wealth is 200 years ahead of a black family.
Yeah.
It's not, it was in this, it's in the plan. It's not this it's my fault. I don't make enough because of my shortcomings. Yeah. And once you know that, it's like, oh, okay, once I started to figure that out, I started excelling beyond it's not me, and then that's when I swear, everything started to blow up, because I was like, oh, wow, okay.
There's some context. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Boston.
Okay.
I grew up with an okay education, but certainly not, you don't learn anything in history class about anything. Right. And then in California, I've learned more in the past year and a half living in North Carolina about black people than anything I've ever learned anywhere else. And that's really what I try to instill in people when I do this slideshow on police brutality. You could talk to a black person who's 65 years old, 60 years old and older for 10 minutes, and you will learn more about black people than you ever learn in any school ever, anytime.
It's funny when I think about some of the work that you do, your ability to pull current affairs and really twist it in a kind of way that's complicated. The day that we're talking today, you recently ran a clip about our Ringling Brothers closing down, and this kind of response about how this long institution is closing down, and the clown responds, well, you might collapse too in light of the freak show, right? Yeah. And so to bring the Ringling Brothers in conversation with, these early days of the Trump presidency, how do you find that space where those things might intersect?
Those are my favorite ones because you are kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're like trying to you take this news item and you sort of link it to another news item and sort of put it together. I'm always, with an administration like this, there's always low-hanging fruit. Like so everyone
just ask SNL.
Yeah, everybody becomes an editorial cartoonist. So when people sit there and go, oh, you're gonna have like a great 4 years, it's like, no, I'm not gonna have a great 4 years. There's gonna be a ton of amateur editorial cartoonists doing all the obvious stuff. So it's upon me to look for that other angle, that other thing. And my specialty is how is it going to affect marginal communities. So so I'm always trying to look at like how how it's going to affect. I'm not going to do the super obvious stuff. Now there are editorial cartoonists right now doing really great obvious stuff and they're doing spectacular stuff. I think Clay Bennett's doing some really great stuff.
What's different about this presidency? I mean, you think about, Chevy Chase's career on SNL, begins with him making fun of Gerald Ford's clumsiness.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, had his moments where he was low-hanging fruit. I remember HBO had this show, not necessarily the news, and so much of what they did was a send-up of Ronald Reagan. Obviously, Clinton had his moments, even Obama to some extent, and George Bush, both of them, whether it's Dana Carvey, playing Herbert or Walker, right? Or, the sends up to W the last recent years. But to see something different about this presidency and this man, right?
Well, it's nice to see SNL becoming relevant again. Although they're partially responsible for putting him in the White House in the first place. But one thing I saw that I thought was a really great point was Judd, I don't know if Judd Apatow came up with this, but he said that on his Twitter feed that it is the more humorous candidate that wins. And not necessarily that they're funny, like they got a great sense of humor, but they're either somehow can be made fun of or whatever. Trump is way funnier than Hillary is.
Right, and it humanizes them. And
Obama was way funnier than Mitt Romney or McCain, and George W. Bush.
Right, then Al Gore, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, and when I read that, I was like, oh my God, like this goes to show you how Bernie was a funny looking dude.
Yeah.
Like he had a much better chance going up against Trump. So we have to collectively remember that. The humorous candidate, the more humorous candidate, has a better chance of winning, and. So
Democrats got to find somebody they can laugh at.
Yeah, they have to.
Now.
They have to. So remember that. Remember that.
What's next for you, Keith?
Oh, I don't know. I'm on deadline. That's the next deadline. Actually, I have a.
And that's a good thing, right?
That is a good thing.
That is a good thing.
The Center for the American South in Chapel Hill is doing an exhibition of my work this semester. I'm actually meeting over there to hang this week.
Yeah, it's good people over there.
Yeah. So that's exciting. I'm doing, it's Black History Month, so of course I'm busy. I'm going to be at Northern Michigan University. Mm-hmm. I'm doing my slideshow up there. I'll be doing the Nasher in like a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
Oh, great.
And just, yeah, I've got a new book with Adam Mansbach, actually. Adam and Craig Robinson co-wrote it, and I illustrated it, called Jake the Fake. It's sort of geared towards like 8 to 10-year-olds, a diary of a wimpy kid, but a bit more diverse. Yeah, and I'll just keep on doing the do. There's a few interesting things when talking about Aaron Magruder and television. A few things that are brewing.
I mean, with so many new platforms now,
Yeah.
A lot of opportunities to do some really good work in that regard.
Yeah, I can't really say anything yet, but
gotcha.
All I could say is
we'll make sure to have you back when you can say.
yeah. I love the fact that Issa Rae and Donald Glover,
Right.
as long as everyone's succeeding,
Right.
they're always looking for the next one, and so let's fingers crossed. And I'll be back. Yeah, I'll be back. This will be the first place I'll talk about it.
You've been watching Left of Black. We've been joined by the gentleman cartoonist Keith Knight. Thanks for joining us, Keith.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything black. Culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back.